Good afternoon and welcome to the POOLBEG PHARMA PLC company presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and they can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll. And I would now like to hand you over to co-founder, executive chairman, Cathal Friel. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody for joining our call investor update this evening. I see we've got nearly 200 people online, which is a fabulous turnout. What we want to tell you tonight is about two hugely exciting trials that we're kicking off momentarily over the summer: our GLP-1 obesity trial, and really importantly, our 001 oncology treatment trial, which is utterly transformational for us. Earlier today, just to let you know, in case you didn't see it, we did complete our oversubscribed fundraise of over 4.8, almost 4.9 million, and that will fully fund those trials and fully fund the company right into 2027. I personally invested 100,000 in that placing. That's on top of 100,000 I invested last year. And at the IPO, I also put over £500,000 at full IPO price. I know the price is not where we want it, but I've now £700,000 real personal cash invested in POOLBEG. Therefore, I think my goals are pretty clearly aligned with all of you shareholders. And I'm very, very excited and thrilled to be in the position POOLBEG is where it is today with this treatment that has potential to transform cancer treatments. On that note, we are in discussions. Jeremy and Liam is going to bring you through everything now, which is very high level to say we're in discussions with two of the top 10 pharma companies, and we're very confident that they will supply, and when that happens, we'll announce that contract by specific trials for the 001 trial. This trial is an open label trial. As such, the cost is quite low. The biggest cost is the drug supply, and as such, with those two big pharma at the table, we expect the biggest cost to be provided free of charge, that of the drug. We feel, and the drug being a bispecific cancer treatment, we feel our 001 has potential to utterly transform the treatment of cancer. With many of the new highly effective cancer treatments, the major bottleneck today is not getting the product, but is getting a bed in one of the specialist cancer treatment centers. This is because these new miracle treatments have quite severe adverse reactions, primarily the CRS response. Many maybe recall the CRS is basically the cytokine storm, which we all heard about during the COVID times. And this is your own body attacking your own body's immune system attacking the body. Our 001 trial is designed, and we believe it will substantially reduce the CRS response while not affecting the efficacy of the cancer treatment. As such, 001 could help move cancer treatments from these specialist cancer centers where the beds are extremely limited into the local community hospital and even into the family home where the treatment can be applied. We're not trying to cure cancer, and what we're trying to do is reduce the adverse reaction from the cancer treatments. As such, our trial will be very quick. This is an open label trial, and as such, there is no placebo, and each patient will get the drug, and we'll know pretty quickly if this has been working, basically if there's an adverse reaction or not. Therefore, we expect interim data by early next year. With our two trials underway, we no longer see the need to be on NASDAQ because, I think you've got what I just said, if 001 trial is remotely successful as we think it is, it'll transform the treatment of cancer. But even more importantly, the 001 trial will utterly transform the prospects for POOLBEG going forward. This is why I invest in biotechs, and this is where I think we'll all invest in. Many people are chasing crypto these days for that 5 or 10x. So hopefully, POOLBEG is as good as any crypto bet is around. And that's a personal opinion. But you might say I'd be biased because I'm the biggest, largest single investor and I'm following my money. As such, our plan is to firmly stay on the AIM market in the weeks ahead. You may see some announcements. We'll be reducing our overheads and right-sizing our cost base as being appropriate, as no longer focusing on NASDAQ. And Jeremy will be very much driving the company going forward. Can I now hand over to Jeremy and Liam, who will take you through these two exciting trials that I believe could transform the company but also transform the treatment of cancer patients.
Great stuff. Thank you, Cathal, for that introduction. Great to have everybody here tonight. Jeremy Skillington, my name is the CEO of POOLBEG Pharma. What Liam and I plan to do over the next 25 minutes or so, we'll take you through our state of play right now, where we are as a company, focusing in on the two main clinical stage programs, POLB 001 and the oral GLP-1 program. We'll take you through those. I do want to leave time for some Q&A at the end. It's a very exciting day for us here. We had our general meeting and AGM here in London earlier on today, so all is good with that. We've got a lineup of several investor meetings over the next few days. So as I say, we're kind of looking forward to move forward with that. So what I'll do is I'll go through the slides here, and I'll hand over to Liam to talk more about the science. But I think, for most of you aware, the POOLBEG, I think we're in a very exciting place right now, certainly with the fundraising now completed. We've got, as Carl said, that runway to 2027. But what's more important, I think we've got a highly experienced team to execute on our focus strategy as it stands right now. Two highly valuable programs that certainly Big Pharma are looking towards to look to bolster their own pipelines, and POLB 001 for treating CRS, or cytokine release syndrome, associated with T-cell engaging cancer immunotherapies. That really is, as Carl said, a company maker. I think it's going to be very exciting as we progress that into the clinic. As such, we've got multiple near-term value inflection points. We've got clinical trials start at the end of this year for 001, and the same actually for the oral GLP-1 is the plan, and then getting data readouts in the first half of next year for both programs, and then full top-line data readout for 001 in H2 next year. So again, we've been engaging over the last several years with pharma companies. One of their key requests for us, they see the CRS approach, they see the value of POLB 001, but their kind of regular or recurrent or frequent request is, can we see this in patients? Can we see the data? We have it in humans and healthy volunteers, but they're asking, can we see this in patients? So that's why we'll be starting this trial in multiple myeloma patients, and we'll go through that in greater detail later on. As mentioned, delighted to complete the oversubscribed fundraise, 4.865 million, which again, along with our existing cash balance, takes us into 2027. So again, that gives us that nice long runway to kind of conclude or complete these clinical trials, and again, runway to get us completion for the partnering with pharma that we've got planned. The pipeline as it stands today, as I mentioned, POLB 001, it's a small molecule, orally available P38 MAP kinase inhibitor. And P38 MAP kinase is a master regulator of that immune inflammatory response. So again, we see this as an exciting target to pursue for this cancer immunotherapy-induced CRS. As I say, a lot of work has been done in the background by the team. So essentially, we are phase 2 ready, and by phase 2, we want to put this in patients. As I say, we're working hard to achieve that with all the various work streams going on in the background around the kind of preclinical, completing that, regulatory aspects, getting the drug supplies. We talked about big pharmas, and talking to the clinical trial sites and clinicians, etc. We will speak about it. Very exciting. The last few weeks, we received FDA orphan drug designation. We'll talk about that later on, but they see the value of this program and the potential to help patients in the future. And on the right-hand side of this POLB 001, just highlighting that we have several near-term clinical milestones that are coming up. It gives us a nice cadence of news flow when it comes to keeping the market updated of our activities. So first patient dosed is planned by the end of this year, so H2 2025. As Carl said, it's an open label trial, so we'll have access to the data as it rolls out. So we'll have the interim analysis expected in the first half of next year for the first, let's say, subset of patients on drug. And then by the end of next year, we'll have the top-line data for all of the patients. We've got 30 patients planned for this clinical trial. So again, nice cadence there. And again, you can layer on top of that the oral GLP-1 program. As we know, the world is pivoting towards looking at these treatments for obesity, the majority of which are injectables. So they're looking for these better deliveries, more convenient drugs, and certainly giving this oral delivery is something that the market is looking for. As I say, we are starting our proof of concept clinical trial planned by the end of the year. And again, top-line data reading out early next year. And again, this is a very short, focused clinical study. And again, if the data is positive in that, there'll be lots of interest in pharma. And we won't touch upon today, but two other programs in the background, novel drug discovery AI programs, worked with Cytoreason and 1-3 using our human viral challenge study database that we acquired or we licensed from hVivo when we demerged. And we got some really interesting data, really interesting targets from both of these AI studies. But in the interest of time, we won't cover that today. We will focus quite a bit on POLB 001. And I do want to ground us in the background, just talk about CRS as an issue. As Colin said, I think it raised people, came into people's minds during the pandemic with these cytokine storms that were causing that severe disease. And obviously, as a company, spinning out of hVIVO initially, we focused on severe influenza. But recently, we saw that there was significant unmet need in this cancer immunotherapy space, where there's still that same cytokine storm concern, cytokine issue. The sick patients can get very sick after receiving these bispecific and CAR T cell treatments. And so a solution is needed to help these patients, and that's where POLB 001 comes in. On the top right here, you'll see greater than 70% of these patients receiving bispecific antibodies or CAR Ts develop CRS. And of course, that's a challenge and that's an issue for the patients. But even on top of that, it's a challenge and an issue for the healthcare system, where they need a lot more patient care in these dedicated cancer clinics. So our goal, if our clinical trial is successful, is to take these cancer patients out of these dedicated cancer clinical trials. They can receive their treatments, there's POLB 001 treatment from home, because it's orally delivered. And I say preventing CRS is something that the market and the clinicians and healthcare system is looking for. Right now, treatments are actually in a reactive manner, where if CRS is developed, they have to be in the clinic to receive their drugs, one of which is a drug called tocilizumab. It's an antibody, so it has to be given by injection or infusion. But we feel that we can have a better solution by preventing CRS from happening in the first place. So I say we've got our clinical trial designed. One of the key endpoints is the prevention of grade 2 CRS. And Liam will go through that in greater detail later on. Now, again, we looked at this last year from a market standpoint, what size marketplace are we moving into? And we see that there's a large uptake of these cancer immunotherapies. And as such, if you can solve the CRS issue with these cancer immunotherapies, there's a potential $10 billion US dollar market here. And I'll go through some of the logic of this later on. So as I say, what that does will prevent CRS, but it also will enable a lot of these cancer patients to get access to these cancer immunotherapies in a rapid manner. The molecule itself, as I say, we've a lot of work's been put into this molecule. It's a terrific, selective, and potent p38 MAP kinase inhibitor, and it's given orally. Again, it's got great bioavailability, and we know from all of our studies it prevents this excessive inflammation, importantly, without immunosuppression. So it lowers that risk of patients developing infections that other immunomodulators might provide. And again, rapidly, we've built out a patent portfolio to protect our interests here, particularly in the cancer immunotherapy space we'll touch upon. And as I say, importantly, we received recently this FDA orphan drug designation. So that's, again, a great milestone for the company. And I think, again, it acknowledged the FDA with all of our dialogues back and forth. It acknowledges that, we have a potentially very exciting treatment here that the FDA's, would like to see us develop. And if we do so, it gives us certain benefits, including market exclusivity. We'll talk about that later on. On the right-hand side here, is lots of work. We are phase 2 ready, so we are ready to go into patients. So the team is working hard to achieve that, as mentioned, before the end of the year. Very favorable safety and tolerability profile of the drug itself. And we've demonstrated that we can inhibit key cytokines, such as TNF-alpha. We've demonstrated this in 2 phase 1 trials in healthy volunteers. And also potent inhibition of interleukin-6 and other key inflammatory markers. So we're not just hitting one target like tocilizumab, we're actually seeing the reduction of a lot of different targets. And Liam will touch upon this shortly. Again, I want to talk about the speed of movement from Poolbeg. As a small biotech company, we're nimble. We know that big pharma have been accused of moving a lot more slowly through the drug development process. I think in 2023, where we were pursuing our studies, thinking about severe influenza, it happened upon both Brendan Buckley and Liam had great discussions around the strategic expansion into immunotherapy, cancer immunotherapy, and that POLB 001 could play a significant role here. And again, we've had lots of discussions with big pharma companies, and we know that they're interested in seeing the data from our studies. We filed patents back in 2023, and at the same year, we presented our phase 1B LPS human challenge data at the American Society of Hematology conference that was on in San Diego as a keynote. So again, this is something that the hematologists see as this could be pretty exciting for in their space to prevent CRS in the first place. Then in 2024, we moved rapidly. We did our deep market analysis, convincing with a convincing $10 billion US market opportunity. We talked to a lot of key opinion leaders, some thought leaders, clinicians, payers, and again, they validate the approach that we're taking, which is very exciting for us. It gives us that great endorsement. And again, similarly that year, we presented our preclinical CRS prevention data at the ASH conference, again in San Diego. And again, that was very well received. So where we are today, as I say, ready to begin our clinical trial later this year. As we said, we've got 2 big pharma companies willing to give us a bispecific antibody, more than likely moving forward with one of them. They've shown strong indications that they'll provide this drug for free, which, as Cathal said, costs a lot of money if you want to pay for it on the market. But they want to see this outcomes from this patient study. And I think that will obviously kind of garner a lot of interest, not just from the bispecific antibody provider, but other pharma companies as well in the same cancer immunotherapy space. And again, lastly, getting this orphan drug designation, again, fantastic from a Poolbeg standpoint. And I applaud and credit the team for the hard work they did into getting that accomplishment across the line. So what I will do now, I'll pass across to Liam, who will go into more of the science behind the program and then talk a bit more about our clinical trial that's planned. Liam, over to you.
Cheers. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And yeah, really excited to speak to all of you today at what is a very exciting time for the company. So I'm just going to mention some of the existing data that we have and then go into our clinical plans over the next year. And just to mention as well that POLB 001 was initially developed as a treatment for chronic inflammatory diseases. So on top of the data not shown here is that this has extensive non-clinical data in a first-in-human study that shows that the tolerability and safety of the molecule is excellent. So the data I'm showing you here today is really how we're positioning it towards cytokine release syndrome or cancer immunotherapy-induced cytokine release syndrome. So the graph I'm showing today here is a humanized mouse model that we did. Humanized meaning that it's a severely immunocompromised mouse that is essentially given a human immune system. So we ablate the mouse model immune system and we actually inject a human immune system. So on the top of the slide, the graph is showing that day 0 humanizations, that's actually the radiation treatment to destroy the existing immune system and to inject in a human immune system. And then on day 5 to give it a tumor. So the very same case as what we would have in the clinic for somebody getting a bispecific antibody. They have a human immune system and then we give them an immunotherapy that induces cytokine release syndrome on day 6. And during that, then we're also dosing with POLB 001 twice daily. And in this model, we used obviously gold standard of cytokine release syndrome and a CD28 superagonist to induce cytokine release syndrome. And we also compared POLB 001 against a TNF-alpha antibody. And the reason we did that is because while tocilizumab, an IL-6 receptor antibody is used in the clinic, in the mouse model empirically, a TNF antibody actually works much better. So this is a stronger standard to use against. On the graph on the left, the CRS scores, what we're looking at it actually is the cytokine release syndrome score induced in the mouse model. So the navy blue on the left-hand side is essentially no cytokine release syndrome. And then when we introduce the CD28 super antibody, then actually we get cytokine release syndrome. So that's that elevation. And as we introduce POLB 001, the light blue, the blue, and the green, what we see is that all 3 doses of POLB 001 that we gave were actually very effective in reducing cytokine release syndrome scores down to the background level of no CRS, similar to how the anti-TNF antibody worked in this model. On the right-hand side, I'm showing a selection of cytokines. We did publish this data at ASH last year, and that went down very well. We showed a wider level of cytokines, including IL-8, IL-10. But here you see IL-6, which is obviously very important in cytokine release syndrome, and also TNF-alpha. Across all the cytokines that we looked at, we actually saw that POLB 001 was very effective at reducing the levels of these cytokines. And with the exception of TNF-alpha, POLB was actually superior to the TNF antibody across all of these cytokines that we tested. So these were extremely promising results and are a good omen as we move forward towards clinical studies. This is a previous clinical study that we did, the LPS Human Challenge study that some of you may be familiar with. So in this model, human subjects, healthy subjects, are given an LPS stimulus. LPS is a component of the bacterial cell wall. And what it does is it induces an acute inflammatory response similar to what we would expect in cytokine release syndrome. So in the left-hand side of the slide, and what we're looking at is the trial design. So the healthy subjects were brought into a clinic and they were dosed with POLB 001 from day 0 to day 7. And what happened was on day 4, we gave them 4 intradermal doses of LPS. And then on day 6, we gave them an IV dose of LPS. And what this model is on the intradermal doses allows us to see the local effects of POLB 001. So how it behaves in the tissues. This is actually in the forearm of the subject. So it gives us a real good idea that the drug can perfuse into tissues and also exert its anti-inflammatory effects there. And obviously with a slight more focus on it today, the IV dose was the one that is particularly pertinent in terms of cytokine release syndrome because it's this systemic inflammatory response. And again, I'm only showing you a subset of the data. IL-6 here, we've previously presented the TNF alpha data and also the IL-8 data. But what we're seeing here is the gray line is essentially after we give the LPS challenge, you see a spike in IL-6. Again, this mimics what we would see in cytokine release syndrome. And as we introduce POLB 001, so the low dose is the green line, what we see is the levels of IL-6 coming down. And the middle and upper dose actually are both very effective at reducing IL-6 to the point where they're equally effective. And that's just because with bi-daily dosing, we get effective coverage and bioavailability of this drug. So really promising in terms of moving forward into a patient population. On the right-hand side, we also looked importantly at a number of clinically meaningful variables. So what I mean about that is that clinical manifestations that anybody would notice on a patient, so things like heart rate, body temperature, that we can measure and that have an impact on patient welfare. So again, with the LPS challenge, it doesn't just introduce molecular inflammation, you actually see that in terms of the temperature. And what you're looking at here, you see an elevation in the heart rate after giving LPS to the subjects. Very similar to what we're seeing with IL-6. Actually, when we pre-dose subjects with POLB 001, you don't see the same level of heart rate rise. So again, these are very promising results that we can actually exert a biological effect on the endpoints that matter in cytokine release syndrome. So what we're looking forward to do, and a really exciting time for the company. Obviously, we've been working on this project for a while now, and we've built up the relationships and really excited to move into the clinic and get these results. So what we are looking at is a phase 2 clinical study in multiple myeloma patients, relapse refractory, being treated with an approved bispecific antibody. We're expecting to start the trial later this year, importantly with interim analysis in the first half of next year and top line data in the second half of next year with potential for partnering and positive data. And as Jeremy mentioned, we do have very strong indications that Big Pharma will be willing to provide the bispecific antibody free of charge for use in the trial. And that's, only a symbolic testament of the level of interest, not just from pharma, but also from academia and across the medical landscape that we've seen in this molecule being developed. And a number of leading myeloma clinicians are really enthusiastic to participate on this trial and to get it moving as soon as possible. So what is the trial? We're keeping it very simple. We're looking at cytokine release syndrome. We want to keep this as easy to recruit and as quick to execute as possible. So essentially a bispecific antibody, we're using an approved bispecific antibody, and we'll be giving twice daily dosing of POLB 001 the same way we did in the previous study. There'll be approximately 30 subjects, and it's going to be an open label single arm study. This is really important because it means that we will actually see a lot of the results in real time feed in next year. So a bispecific antibody at the moment is given 2 what's called step-up doses before you get the full dose. And the reason they do step-up doses, these are essentially micro doses, because if they were to give a full dose to a subject, there'd be overwhelming cytokine release syndrome. So they give small doses to get the subject used to it and then work up towards a full dose. And as Jeremy mentioned, at the moment, this is predominantly done in a hospital setting where they're an inpatient for approximately a week while these doses. mainly just for the risk of cytokine release syndrome. So our intent will be to study the subjects during this time. And again, this is an endpoint where it happens within the first 1 to 2 weeks. 99% of all cytokine release syndrome of bispecific antibodies occurs in the first 2 weeks. So we'll be doing a very short trial focused on this period and seeing how effective the drug is at preventing cytokine release syndrome. Our priorities was to really make this trial simple, neat, and straightforward for subjects. And that's reflected in the endpoints that we're going to be looking at. So what are we looking at? We're not following subjects to things like overall survival or progression-free survival that you might see in other typical oncology studies. What we're looking at is something that happens very quickly during the step-up dosing, and the results of this trial will be evident quite quickly as well. So we're looking at the instance of grade 2 plus cytokine release syndrome. Grade 2 just means it's slightly more severe, and that's one of the indications that the regulators find there's more importance, I guess, behind grade 2 plus cytokine release syndrome. We also want to confirm the safety and pharmacokinetics of POLB 001 itself. First time going into a patient population, exceptionally important to do. And then we'll also be looking at other endpoints, such as the instance of all grade CRS and how much tocilizumab is used. Tocilizumab is the standard of care essentially for cytokine release syndrome, but it's importantly used reactively, not prophylactically. We're going to dose POLB 001, and the hope is that there won't be any cytokine release syndrome in these subjects. On that, I am going to hand back over to Jeremy to go through a couple of slides on the market opportunity.
Super. Thank you, Liam, for that. Yes. 1 second there. Yeah. Sorry, I just had a bit of a glitch there. Sorry, thanks for that. So I want to talk through again the value that we're going to bring here. I think we talk a lot about the science and patient benefit, etc., healthcare benefit. But what's the financial benefit here? I think overall to shareholders of POOLBEG, etc. So I just want to share on the left-hand side here the growth in these bispecific and CAR T cell therapies. These cancer immunotherapies are growing exponentially. They're being approved very regularly. And the data coming out of them is quite impressive. There's a lot of success. There's a lot of indeed talks about cancer cures for these hematological cancers. What's interesting right now is that they're moving more into solid tumors and even into autoimmune diseases. So there's scope for expansion there. But right now in 2030, they expect that these T-cell engaging therapies can have a revenue generation of 120 billion on their own. But as I mentioned earlier on, 70% or so develop CRS. So we're looking to be alongside these for all of these drugs when they're given. There's the potential that POLB 001 will be given as well. And obviously we can kind of market that and commercialize that independently. I didn't mention about the FDA orphan drug designation. Again, fantastic achievement for the team. But what this does, and I think importantly for us and our potential partners, this gives us 7 years of US marketing exclusivity from the date of approval. So again, you're cornering a market there. You can prevent CRS using these P38 MAP kinase inhibitors. And as I say, so we've got to jump on the field that way. Other benefits include cost savings with regard to drug application fees, upwards of $4 million value there, and early access to these special protocol assessments. So that's like it's like your red telephone line into the FDA to get to help in the assistance of the application, and also potential benefit for tax credits for qualified clinical trials. Again, all of these will be of interest to our pharma partners. So again, POLB 001 potential to be the first approved preventative therapy for cancer immunotherapy-induced CRS. So when we looked at the numbers, we picked 2 different patient types here who received these CAR Ts or bispecifics. We looked at multiple myeloma patients and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma patients in both the US and the European Union. And we estimate that's about 500,000 patients. You can see on the right-hand side there the breakdown of these 2 patient types, say diffuse large B-cell lymphoma and multiple myeloma. And as I say, preventing CRS really opens up the market here when many more of these patients can get access to the drugs, because right now there's a delay in getting access to drugs because they're sitting in these cancer clinics, these cancer beds waiting for CRS to even develop, and then they're treated on site. So we can potentially make this kind of a community treatment where the patients can go home and we'll manage their CRS from home. So as I say, fantastic opportunity for the patients, to have, to not develop CRS in the first place. But I think what's intriguing and exciting to pharma companies is that they will get more of their drug, more of their bispecific antibody CAR Ts into patients, because, as I say, they're not sitting around in these transplant beds, preventing other patients from getting their drug. So we see this as a bottleneck that POOLBEG can open up. And as mentioned, we see this as a preventative therapy, removing the bottleneck of greater than $10 billion. And we've talked, as mentioned, all the key opinion leaders, or many key opinion leaders across in the US, in France, and the UK. I think Martin Kaiser sums it up well, so stating that if there was a therapy that was orally delivered, a whole lot of the infrastructure requirements fall away. So you need less hospital beds, less doctors, less nurses, but they can be assigned elsewhere. So I think we're providing a very important service here across POLB 001. I do want to spend just a brief minute on GLP-1 before wrapping up, because I do want to leave time for questions. Unfortunately, we got to shut things down at 5:45 because I got to run to get a train. We're here in London right now. We're heading up to Manchester to meet with other investors later on tomorrow, etc. So I do have a hard stop at 5:45. So talking about the GLP-1 program. As I say, the world has kind of turned in that direction. The obesity epidemic, as is, they realize that these, what were once diabetes drugs, have profound effects on weight loss. And the majorities are given by injection. You have the likes of Wegovy, people are familiar with, semaglutide is another the generic name, but a lot of these drugs are on the market, sizable marketplace, 150 billion by 2031. So we're looking to run a clinical trial for this oral encapsulated technology. So this is a validated technology itself. So we're encapsulating this oral, the GLP-1 receptor agonist, and then giving it orally to patients. And as I say, we're looking forward to getting that trial worked up as well, getting that started before the end of the year is the plan. A lot of work going on in the background around manufacturing, getting the clinical trial side ready, etc. And we're going to run this with Professor Carel Leroux. He's based in Dublin, but he also works at the University of Ulster. And basically, we're looking to demonstrate the safety, tolerability, and pharmacokinetics of orally delivered GLP-1 to demonstrate its uptake. We're looking at 20 volunteers here. These are obese subjects. As I said, working closely with Carel Leroux and our technology collaborators, Anabio, to move this forward rapidly, to get it in the clinic. Again, importantly, to get that human proof of concept data that pharma so crave. Again, the numbers on the left-hand side, huge impact on obesity, on the economic impact. Again, that's in the US only. But the revenue generation, 150 billion by 2031, I mentioned. As we know, the US population, about 42% are affected by obesity. So they're looking to reduce those numbers. And on the right-hand side then, we'll dwell, but there's a lot of issues with the current drugs that we could potentially benefit. As I say, giving this orally, you can potentially see a lot of these issues moving away, particularly with patient adherence to taking the drug. And as mentioned, our colleagues, Anabio there in the bottom, they have a large manufacturing facility themselves, the FDA accredited, and they have a number of commercialized products using their technologies about oral delivery of, say, probiotics and vitamins, etc. So it's a validated technology. So we're just looking forward to see that pharmaceutical benefit, let's say, in delivering GLP-1 orally. So again, with the trial beginning before the end of the year, with, again, very rapid trial. So we'll have top-line data the first half of next year if all progresses as expected. So investment highlights, just my wrap-up slide before we get to the Q&A. A reminder, fantastic team behind us. Very exciting pipeline with two very attractive and high-value programs, 001 as well as the GLP-1. We do believe with 001 we can have the potential to transform this cancer treatment, this T-cell engaging, this cancer immunotherapy, so that people, so it'll be more in the community than it'll be in the hospitals, which again, great benefits to everybody all around. Again, multiple near-term value inflection points. Again, we'll update the markets as these are progressing. And again, we see these are very partnerable, that once we have the human data, and pharma have told us this, having human data is really what drives our interest. We'll be able to get these programs partnered and again, driving value for POOLBEG at the same time. And again, very excited. Obviously, today is an important day where you get the approval for our oversubscribed fundraise. So we have a combined cash to get us into 2027 to complete the trials and obviously complete the transactions, the partnering transactions thereafter. So again, greatly appreciate your time. And let's take, we've got 10 or 12 minutes so for questions. So I know that some questions have been coming through. So what I will do is I will read these out and I'll assign whether myself or Liam will take the questions, maybe back to Carl, but we can take it from there and take our time with this. All right, let's see. First question, this one is for Liam. If you could take this, Liam. Has POOLBEG made a request to the EMA for orphan drug designation for POLB 001? Good question. We have the FDA, but Liam, over to you.
Yeah, really good question, and obviously one that a lot of people are going to have interest in. So at the moment, we have, of course, engaged the EMA, but we've also prioritized the FDA engagement process. The US market is the biggest in the world, and it's always where launch is going to be first. And there's other complications that EMA orphan applications have to be updated every year once they're awarded. But we will be providing further details of that in due course as soon as we can, really.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Liam. And question 2, I think this is probably best for you as well, Liam, just on the technical front and the patent front. For POLB 001, in simple terms, what do your IP patents cover? CAR-T, bispecifics, influenza, are other areas included such as sepsis, COVID, hard tumors, I presume solid tumors related CRS?
Thanks, Jeremy. And again, another really good and important question. We've always been really open with what our patent strategy is, and that we do have very broad IP in the cancer immunotherapy space. And we're always looking to expand and strengthen that as we go along. With the existing filings, we do expect protection out to at least 2043, which is, excellent. And we are focused on that 7 years market exclusivity in the US as well from our orphan designation recently. But of course, as we increase our filings, we'll definitely extend the updates to the markets.
Brilliant, Liam, brilliant. Question 3, just reading this now. Liam, I think you can take a break for a minute. I'll take this one. What is happening with regards to your AI studies of influenza and RSV? Have possible new treatments been identified or old drugs been identified that could be repurposed? Are we likely to hear solid news on progress within the next 6 months? Again, appreciate the interest in this. As I say, in the interest of time today, we didn't have the necessary time to go through in detail. So again, historically, this is kind of interesting from a Poolbeg standpoint. When we spun out of hVIVO, we did have a lot of the data that came from hVIVO. They've essentially it's the world's largest database of infectious disease progression data. So this is where you're giving healthy volunteers a virus in a quarantine setting. So they become sick and they recover, and we've taken kind of blood samples all the way through. So I think ideal data for this AI analysis to understand what's going on, let's say, under the hood when it comes to infectious disease progression. So we did establish 2 very important partnerships. Cytoreason, who they're Pfizer's AI partner of choice. Pfizer, I think, are a main investor in Cytoreason. They've invested in their collaboration. They used them for a lot of their disease biology work from an AI standpoint. And the second partner was with 13 Biotech. They're based in New York, who did our RSV work. So I think it's kind of quite interesting. Certainly there were very successful collaborations. We did identify some novel drug targets that, again, heretofore, we don't believe anybody would have associated with infectious diseases. And with RSV and 13 in particular, we did identify some repurposing drugs, some drugs that have progressed in the clinic, not for infectious diseases, but potentially could be repurposed, because we know from our AI studies that they can remodulate the biology or help stop disease from progression. So as I say, there has always been a lot of interest in big pharma companies in AI. And of course, the infectious diseases are not going away. They've always been around. So the plan now is to seek partners for this work. We do want to see this move forward. And say we do think we have some nuggets that we want to develop. But certainly from a company standpoint, 001 and oral GP1, I think, is real value drivers. And again, to use Cahill's word, company makers. So again, we'll keep you updated on that progression. Next question. I'm happy to take this as well, Liam. What is happening with respect to the oral vaccine delivery program for which free funding was received? Again, thanks for that. So this is we received a grant essentially from the Irish government, the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund. We're partnered with Anabio, who have this oral delivery technology we talked about for GLP-1, as well as infectious disease experts at University College Dublin and Trinity College Dublin. And essentially is looking to encapsulate vaccines to make them orally deliverable. Again, a lot of vaccines right now, as you know, are given by injection. So you're absolutely right. This is a low-cost program to Poolbeg because of this grant funding. And, we have been working on this in the background. As I say, our academic partners and Anabio have been doing quite a bit of work as well. So we have made some breakthroughs, which I think are quite interesting. Again, not say RNSable, not announceable yet, because within the confines. But we're happy with the progress that we're made. We're happy with identifying, say, what key adjuvants, what we ought to use, what key antigens to use that help stimulate the immune system. So we've got some interesting work in that area, and of course we'll update the market as we progress. So again, very productive collaboration with our academic collaborators as well as our colleagues at AnaBio. So again, as I say, it's moving along in the background with some interesting data coming through. Next question. Yeah, I'm happy to take this as well, Liam. If the oral GLP-1 trial is successful, what advantage does the NASDAQ strategic partner have? How does this translate into potential terms of a partnership agreement? Not sure I fully understand. I know we had a collaboration with a NASDAQ group around the same technology, but as I say, we're very excited. And I say this repeatedly. Getting this into humans, getting this into you would get human data from the study will certainly trigger a lot of interest. Not just from NASDAQ strategic partners. I think it's global that you'll have pharma. Those certainly in the GLP-1 space will be interested to see the data that's coming out. So again, as Liam, as I've gone through earlier on, a very interesting trial, very straightforward trial. We'll have top line data next year. And I said, if we can deliver, an oral GLP-1, I think there'll be substantial demand, across all different companies. And as you know, the likes of Ozempic, for example, these are given by injection. So people are looking for a more convenient administration. But I think importantly, with the license that we have from AnaBio around metabolic diseases, we think that we can secure, very attractive deal terms with the human data in hand. And as I say, from a business development standpoint, we continue to engage in pharma companies who again are interested to see the clinical data as it comes out, as you would expect. Let me think. There's one here, Liam. I'll give to you. Oncology trials, I presume, are very long and expensive. Why is yours different?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And again, it's a really good question and an important question as we move forward into next year. And it's one of the things I'm trying to emphasize is that cytokine release syndrome is something that happens very quickly after the commencement of therapy. So during this step up period. So, and again, this is also something which is clinically observable. So other oncology trials might have things like expensive radiology scans that really drive up the cost of trials. We don't need any of that. This is simple clinical observation. It's going to happen really quickly if it happens, in the first 2 weeks really after the initiation of treatment. It's open label and single arm, which means that there isn't any placebo control and there's no unblinding. Of course, next year there'll be a couple of database readouts, but really when we have a good relationship with the investigators, we're going to have a really good indication of how this is progressing in real time. And we're working with people who are going to be keen to update it as often as possible next year.
Brilliant. And Liam, on top of that, there's a kind of, you could say, a corollary question has come through. How can we run a valid test without a placebo? That's from TB. So thanks. It's a continuum, you could say, but it's a good question.
So again, this is a really important question. And of course, later in the clinical development, we would be doing randomized controlled trials either against a placebo or against something else. For this trial, we don't need to. So we're going first into patients. Cytokine release syndrome is something that occurs in a large proportion of patients. So about 70% of this patient population. So even with 30 patients, we're going to have a really strong indication of how effective the drug is. And that's what we really need before we move into large powered studies, because we need data to power those studies off. So this is going to give us a lot of indication about what that would look like. And also from a partnering pharma perspective, it's going to give them a really good indication of how effective the drug will be. Obviously, there'll be some molecular readouts as well, like cytokine profiles. And again, this is going to give us a really compelling profile of what POLB 001 is doing in this patient population. Brilliant.
Thank you for that, Liam. And just in the interest of time, just the last question, and I'll take this. Why should an investor buy in now? Again, great questions as always. But I think from a Poolbeg standpoint, we really in the last several months, Cathal talked about kind of the work done last year, looking towards NASDAQ. We're putting that behind now, focused on the A market. I think as you've seen from today's presentation, we've got a number of very exciting clinical milestones coming through. So there's going to be a lot of news flow. There's going to be a lot of updates. As I say, the POLB 001 we do think is groundbreaking. and we think it'd be company making. So again, the milestones there, we're starting a trial before the end of the year, interim data in the first half of next year, and top line towards the end, and the GLP-1 as well. So a lot of news flow coming through. Obviously, we've got other aspects going on in the background as well. We'll update as they come through. But I think importantly right now, we're focused on execution. Again, happily with the fundraise, we've got a runway into 2027. We see we have a fantastic team. We know what we're doing. We're going to execute on this. So I think now is a great time that the only way for Poolbeg is up from here, is my belief. So again, excited for for investors to come and join us for the journey. So on that note, I'm looking at the clock here because I do got a dash in 30 seconds or so. But again, just want to spend the last few minutes to thank you all for your time today. I hope you appreciate the update, and say a lot of work goes on in the background of Poolbeg, but really like engaging with our investors and would-be investors to bring them along for the journey, and looking forward to giving you more further updates as we progress. And again, appreciate your time today, and look forward to updating you for other activities in the future. So thank you for that, and I'll wrap it up there.
That's fantastic, Jeremy, Cathal, Liam. Thank you very much indeed for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you will now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the board can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of POOLBEG Pharma PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.
Thank you.